The sound was like someone gargling gravel, or perhaps a particularly angry cat learning to play the bagpipes. Markov Jet had grown accustomed to the myriad of dissonant noises that plagued the orbital megaprison Ziggurax, but this was a new one. He wondered if the latest cosmic anomaly had decided to start its own heavy metal band. "What in the unholy void is that racket?" he muttered to himself, even though talking to oneself was a surefire way to get labeled quirky by his fellow inmates, which was just prison speak for dead sooner rather than later. Ziggurax orbited a desolate planet so unremarkable that it didn't even have a proper name, just a string of numbers and letters that sounded like a toddler trying to learn the alphabet. The prison was a place for humanity's cast-offs, the ones who'd pissed off the wrong people, or, like Markov, had the misfortune of being too clever for their own good. As he shuffled down the dimly lit corridor, a mixture of sweat and desperation thick in the recycled air, Markov pondered his current situation. The guards, whom he affectionately referred to as all the charm of a black hole with none of the gravitational pull, had been on edge ever since the last anomaly. Not that he blamed them. Reality itself seemed to be having an existential crisis every time the anomaly reared its ugly head. "Hey, Jet." The voice was like nails on a chalkboard if the chalkboard was also on fire. It belonged to Crag, a beefy humanoid with a face that looked like it had been put together by committee, each member of which had a different idea of what a face should look like. "Crag, my favorite philosophical debate partner," Markov replied. "How's existential dread treating you today?" "About as well as you'd expect in this cosmic hellhole," Crag grunted, his expression somewhere between a scowl and constipation. "You heard the noise. I thought maybe you developed a new hobby," Markov said with a smirk. "But no, it's probably just another anomaly." "Great," Crag said, his voice dripping with sarcasm like oil from a leaky freighter. "Just what I need, more reality-bending fun times." The anomaly, an ever-present cosmic horror, was the universe's way of reminding them that things could always get worse. It didn't kill anyone, not directly at least. It just twisted reality into a shape Picasso might have painted after a particularly bad day. "You know," Markov mused, "I once read that the universe tends towards chaos. I feel like we're getting the VIP experience of that philosophy." "You and your books," Crag snorted. "What's a story gonna do against a freaking anomaly?" "Well," Markov said, scratching his chin like a wise sage or perhaps a chimpanzee with an itch, "stories have been keeping humans sane, or at least less insane, since we crawled out of the primordial soup." Crag raised an eyebrow, or attempted to. His face, after all, had its limitations. "You're saying we should start a book club?" "Why not?" Markov chuckled. "We can call it Tales of Cosmic Survival First Meeting. How not to lose your mind when reality decides to screw you over." The corridors of Ziggurax were a labyrinth of metal and despair, each turn leading nowhere you wanted to be. As they walked, Markov couldn't help but notice the walls seemed to shimmer slightly, like the air above a flame. The anomaly was acting up again. "Look at that," Markov said, pointing. "Reality's going wibbly-wobbly again." "That's the technical term?" Crag asked. "In scientific circles, yes," Markov replied with a grin. "We should probably get back to the others, make sure no one's turned into a two-dimensional pancake." They made their way to the common area, a space that had all the charm of an industrial freezer. The inmates were gathered in small clusters, their faces a mix of apathy and mild panic. Reality distortion had a way of bonding even the most disparate of people. "All right, folks," Markov announced, clapping his hands like a game show host trying to keep the contestants engaged. "Let's talk about our unfriendly neighborhood anomaly." "You got a plan, Jet?" asked Lena, a wiry woman with eyes like steel and a wit to match. "Plan might be generous," Markov said. "More of a slightly better than average idea." The room fell silent, all eyes on him. It was an odd feeling, being the center of attention in a place where attention usually meant a shank in the back. "Here's the deal," he continued. "Every time the anomaly acts up, it warps reality, yeah. But has anyone noticed that it tends to happen more when we're all losing our collective minds? Murmurs of agreement spread through the room. You're saying it's feeding off us? Lena asked, her skepticism palpable. I'm saying it might be, Markov replied. We're dealing with a cosmic entity that seems to enjoy a side of chaos with its entropy. So what do? Crag asked, crossing his arms, a gesture that made his muscles look like they were auditioning for a low-budget action movie. We do what humans do best, Markov said with a shrug. We tell stories. We distract ourselves, keep our minds busy with anything but panic. Lena snorted. And if that doesn't work, then we die with a good story on our lips, Markov said, not without a hint of dark humor, which is more than most folks in this place can say. The room was silent again, a contemplative silence, like the universe taking a deep breath before exhaling chaos. The Anomaly's presence was a constant hum in the background, a reminder that sanity was a luxury they couldn't afford. All right, Jet, Lena said finally. Let's hear one of these stories. Markov nodded, taking a deep breath. All right, how about this one? There was once a man trapped in a prison that orbited a god-forsaken planet. As he spoke, the room seemed to breathe with him, the tension easing slightly. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was pointless, but in the face of cosmic horror, it was something. And sometimes, something was all you needed to keep going. The tale wove its way through the room, a thread of hope, or at least distraction, in the fabric of despair. And for a moment, just a moment, the anomaly seemed to fade, its power diminished by the simple act of storytelling. But reality, like a scorned lover, wasn't about to let them off the hook so easily. The hum grew louder, the walls shimmered more violently, and Markov knew they were in for another ride on the cosmic roller coaster. Well, he said with a wry smile, looks like story time's over. The room braced itself as the anomaly's full force hit, reality twisting and turning like a snake in a death roll. Markov's voice rose above the chaos, steady and calm. Hold on, folks, he shouted. Just remember, the universe may be out to get us, but we can still go down swinging. And then, with a cacophony that would have made a banshee cover its ears, reality shattered around them, plunging Ziggurat into a new, terrifying dance with the anomaly. As the world around them bent and flexed like an overconfident gymnast, Markov couldn't help but laugh. It was a laugh born of madness, desperation, and just a hint of defiance. Guess we're not getting any reading done today, he quipped, clutching a nearby railing as the floor attempted to become the ceiling. Somewhere in the chaos, Crag's voice rang out, "You know, Jet, you're gonna be the death of us." "Maybe," Markov shouted back. "But at least we'll have one hell of a story to tell when we get to the other side." And with that, they rode the storm, clinging to their sanity and each other as reality itself tried to unhinge them. In the grand scheme of things, they knew they were insignificant, but in their little corner of the universe they were everything. So they held on, defying the cosmic chaos with the only weapon they had, their humanity. And maybe, just maybe, that would be enough. The hum of the anomaly faded like a bad smell on a breezy day, leaving the common room of Ziggurat in a state of disheveled chaos. Inmates were strewn about like discarded action figures, some groaning, others quietly laughing at the absurdity of their cosmic predicament. Markov pushed himself upright, dusting off the existential dread like it was lint on his jumpsuit. "Another beautiful day in paradise," he muttered, offering a hand to Crag, who accepted it with the grace of a rhino attempting ballet. "You all right, big guy?" Crag grunted, which was to say he was fine. "You ever think maybe we're the universe's way of entertaining itself, Jet?" "All the time," Markov replied, feigning cheerfulness. "I'm just waiting for the laugh track to kick in." Amidst the dust and debris, a small figure emerged, moving with the practiced stealth of someone who wouldn't want to be noticed if reality shifted again. Yara Solace, the enigmatic storyteller of Ziggurat, had an aura about her that suggested she'd seen both the beginning and the end of the universe and wasn't particularly impressed by either. "Nice of you to drop in, Yara," Markov greeted her. "Plan on sticking around for the apocalypse?" Yara smirked, her eyes glinting like stars with a sense of mischief. "Jet, darling, if the universe is ending, I wouldn't miss it for the world, or what's left of it. And how do you feel about forming a ragtag group of misfits to fight against cosmic horrors? I feel like you're trying to recruit me into some half-baked, galaxy-saving scheme." "You know me so well," Markov said, grinning. "But first, let me introduce you to the rest of the merry band of lunatics." Glint, the tech-savvy hacker with fingers quicker than a politician sidestepping blame, was already tinkering with a piece of machinery that looked suspiciously like it had come from places it shouldn't have been. "Markov, you see this mess," he said, pointing at the heap of wires and circuit boards. "It's like the universe tried to put together a jigsaw puzzle with a hammer." "Seems fitting," Markov replied. "Meet Yara, our resident bard." Glint nodded, not bothering to look up from his work. "Yara, huh? Heard your stories are better than the crap they broadcast from the guard's tower." "High praise," Yara said dryly. "And I hear you can hack into anything with a power source and a bad attitude." "Just doing my bit to keep the lights on," Glint retorted, finally glancing up. "And maybe find a way to boot us out of this cosmic playpen." Markov clapped his hands together, a gesture caught between enthusiasm and sarcasm. "All right, team. We've got a celestial headache on our hands, and my guess is it's only going to get weirder. Any ideas that don't involve us becoming worm food?" Cragg scratched his chin, which required a fair amount of concentration. "We could try to ignore it, pretend it's not there." "Solid plan, Cragg," Markov said with a wink. "But I'm thinking something with a bit more bang for our buck." Yara leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Maybe there's something in the anomaly that responds to human stories' emotions. Ever think of that? Like a cosmic petri dish experimenting with our fears and hopes." "Great," Glint said, rolling his eyes. "We're the lab rats of some extra-dimensional science fair." "Wonderful. But if that's the case," Markov said, "maybe we can use that against it, distract it, confuse it, or, dare I dream it, drive it off." The room fell silent, a conspiratorial air settling over the makeshift crew. It was a ridiculous idea, but then again, everything about their existence was ridiculous. Why not add one more absurdity to the pile? "Let's say we're on board," Glint said. "What's the plan, genius?" Markov threw his hands up in mock surrender. "Well, that's the million-credit question, isn't it?" Yara chuckled softly, the sound like a whisper of wind through a forgotten graveyard. "We start by knowing our enemy. We need to study the anomaly, see if it has patterns, moods. If it's alive, or something like it, it has to have weaknesses." "I'm more used to taking down firewalls than cosmic horrors," Glint said. "But I guess troubleshooting's troubleshooting." "Think of it as the ultimate hackathon," Markov suggested, "where the prize for winning is not dying." Cragg cracked his knuckles, a sound like boulders falling down a steep hill. "And if studying it doesn't work, then we do what humans do best," Markov said. "We improvise." With the seed of a plan, albeit a very, very small seed, the group moved into action. Glint set to work, cobbling together sensors from salvaged parts, trying to decode whatever signals the anomaly might be broadcasting. Yara gathered a few more inmates, those with skills that could be twisted into usefulness under the right circumstances. Markov, for his part, tried to keep morale as high as possible in a place where optimism was as rare as a warm meal. As Glint fiddled with his makeshift devices, he muttered under his breath, "This whole thing is a damn circus." "With us as the clowns," Yara added, watching him work with a bemused expression. "Clowns or not, we're all we've got," Markov said, attempting to sound like a leader. "And I, for one, would like to not go down as cosmic collateral damage." "Famous last words," Cragg said, shrugging. "But better than no words at all." Time passed, marked only by the flickering of the lights and the incessant humming of the anomaly, like an omnipresent mosquito with a vendetta. The group worked in shifts, each trying to piece together the puzzle of their invisible adversary. And slowly, painfully, a picture began to emerge, a picture that looked a lot like a dog's breakfast. "All right," Glint said, wiping sweat and grime from his forehead. I think we may have something. It's not much, but it's a start. What have you got? Markov asked, peering over Glint's shoulder at the jumble of wires and screens. Patterns, Glint replied. We're talking faint but detectable. The anomaly seems to pulse in response to stress. The more agitated we get, the more it reacts. So, it really is feeding off our anxiety? Yara asked, her brows knitting together in thought. Looks like, Glint confirmed. Which means we need to keep our cool. Great, because that's so easy in this place, Cragg said, his sarcasm delivered with the subtlety of a hammer. Markov rubbed his chin, deep in thought. What if we try to throw it off? Give it something it doesn't expect. Yara nodded slowly. Stories, dreams. We flood it with so much nonsense it overloads. And who doesn't love a little chaos? Glint said with a smirk, adding a few more connections to his contraption. They settled into a routine, the small group of conspirators in their cosmic rebellion. Yara's voice became a constant presence, weaving tales and fables, some real, many fabricated, each one a tapestry of emotion and distraction meant to baffle the anomaly. Markov kept spirits up with his ever-present wit, while Glint and a few others worked tirelessly to refine their understanding of the anomaly's erratic behavior. Cragg stood guard, his form a reassuring bastion against the madness outside. Hope, a rare commodity in Zigrax, flickered like a candle against a terrible wind. And while the odds were stacked against them, and the specter of doom hovered ever-present, they clung to their newfound camaraderie like a lifeline. One day, as Markov and Yara exchanged retorts over a particularly grim tale involving a hero's inevitable downfall, Glint interrupted with news. I think we've got something. A way to maybe, just maybe, push it back. You've been holding out on us, Glint, Markov accused, half-jokingly. And here I thought you were just soldering for fun. Glint grinned, holding up a device that looked like a cross between a radio and an explosive. This little thing might just be our ticket. It amplifies our emotional broadcasts, so to speak. If we can coordinate, we might just throw the anomaly off balance. Or it explodes and takes us with it, Cragg added, ever the pessimist. Details, Glint shrugged. But it's worth a shot. The idea was simple enough in theory but absurdly complex in its execution. They had to synchronize, channel their thoughts and emotions through the crude amplifier while bombarding the anomaly with the equivalent of every story, dream, nightmare, and hope they'd ever had. It was a gamble, but then again, everything was a gamble in Zigrax. As they prepared for this last-ditch effort, Markov took a moment to address his ragtag band of misfits. All right, folks. We've come this far, and now we've got one shot at this crazy plan. Whatever happens next, I just want to say, save the speeches for after we're not dead, Yara interrupted, smirking. We've got a universe to confuse. Exactly, Markov said, grinning. Let's give the anomaly a taste of human ingenuity, and maybe, just maybe, we'll live to tell the tale. And with that, the group steeled themselves, ready to dance with the cosmic devil one last time, fueled by nothing more than hope, sarcasm, and an undying human spirit. The anomaly was throwing a cosmic tantrum, like a toddler hopped up on too much sugar and existential dread. Lights flickered with epileptic enthusiasm, shadows lurked with menace, and the air was pregnant with a tension that made the hairs on the back of Markov's neck stand up like soldiers on parade. It was enough to make a man nostalgic for the days when all he had to worry about was finding someone who wouldn't shiv him in the showers. Anyone else see that? Glint asked, eyes darting around like a guilty pigeon, staring at the walls that seemed to breathe alongside their gasps. See what? Yara replied, her tone as dry as the Sahara. The walls closing in or the faces in the shadows giving us the stink eye. Glint just waved a dismissive hand as if swatting away an imaginary fly. Never mind. It's probably just my impending insanity. Well, don't keep it to yourself, Markov quipped. Share the joy. The anomaly had upped its game, sending hallucinations through Zigrax like spam emails. Everyone got one whether they wanted it or not. And oh, how the paranoia spread. Inmates glanced over their shoulders, whispering conspiracies, their minds unraveling under the strain of cosmic pressure. It was like living inside a never-ending soap opera, with worse lighting and no dramatic music to warn you of impending doom. Markov gathered the crew in their makeshift command center, a generous term for the corner of a room with a few scattered crates and a half-functional screen. He took a seat, leaning back with an air of casual desperation. "All right, folks, our cosmic houseguest is upping the ante. Any bright ideas before we all go stark raving mad?" Yara arched an eyebrow. "You mean we haven't already?" Crag grunted, his usual contribution to strategy meetings. It was the kind of grunt that said, "I'm here, I'm big, and I might hit something." Comforting, really. Glint fiddled with his contraption, wires and circuits crisscrossing like a demented spider's web. "Look, the amplifier works kind of. But I think we need more. The stories alone aren't enough. We need to feed it something else, something unexpected." "Like what?" Markov asked, bemused. "Karaoke night, interpretive dance, emotions," Yara suggested, leaning forward, eyes gleaming with mischief. "Instead of just telling stories, we need to live them. Create real, honest-to-God emotional responses. It's not just the content, it's the delivery." "Sounds risky," Markov said slowly, considering the implications. "You're suggesting we throw our hearts into the thing and hope it doesn't snack on them. Got a better idea?" Yara challenged, a sly smile tugging at her lips. Markov shrugged. "Not really. I was hoping to bluff our way through this, maybe threaten it with bad Yelp reviews." Glint sighed, rubbing his temples. "I vote we try Yara's plan. Better than waiting around for the walls to start offering life advice." Crag nodded, the kind of nod that said, "Sure, why not? I'll punch a wall if it helps." With their plan as solid as a sandcastle at high tide, they moved to action. They'd turned their corner of Zigrax into an emotional theme park, complete with all the highs and lows of human experience. Because why not complicate an already absurd situation? The first attempt was a disaster. They started with Yara spinning a tale of love and loss, hoping to tug at the threads of the Anomaly's attention. The amplifier buzzed to life, emitting a low hum that vibrated through their bones. At first, nothing happened. Just the usual flickering lights and ominous whispers. Then the walls closed in with a stomach-churning lurch, and the air filled with laughter, not the pleasant kind, but the sort that made chills run a marathon up your spine. The Anomaly wasn't just listening, it was mocking them. "Well, that backfired spectacularly," Markov deadpanned, as shadows flickered and danced, forming grotesque shapes that seemed to leer at them. "Maybe it has a terrible sense of humor," Glint said, his voice tinged with frustration. "Or maybe we're just terrible performers," Yara countered, unfazed by their first failure. "We need something stronger, something real." "Great," Markov said, sarcasm dripping. "Anyone know how to bottle existential dread?" Crag grunted again, which was probably his way of saying, "Count me out of any emotional displays." But Markov wasn't ready to give up just yet. "All right, let's try this again. We need everyone to pitch in this time. Give it everything you've got." The idea was simple: create a cacophony of emotions, a medley of human experience that would either ensnare the Anomaly or overload it. They all took their places, standing around the contraption like cultists at a bizarre techno-ritual. "Ready?" Markov asked, even though no one in their right mind could ever really be ready for this sort of thing. "Let's do this before I start seeing pink elephants," Glint muttered, flipping the switch. And so they began. Yara's voice rose, a melody of sorrow and joy, weaving a tapestry of tales that pulled at the heart. Glint added his own touch, recounting a story of triumph over adversity with a hint of self-deprecating humor. Markov tossed in a few anecdotes, the kind that made you laugh and cringe in equal measure. Crag, bless him, even managed a few gruff words about loyalty and strength. The Anomaly responded, a maelstrom of shadow and light swirling around them, pulsing in time with their emotional outpouring. It was terrifying and beautiful, like watching a supernova from the comfort of a rickety lifeboat. For a moment, just a moment, they felt it, an understanding, a connection. The anomaly wasn't just an enemy, it was something else entirely, a force trying to understand, to communicate. But then it pushed back, a tidal wave of confusion and anger that sent them reeling. The amplifier sparked and sputtered, the hum turning into a screech that made teeth ache and skulls vibrate. "Shut it down," Markov yelled, covering his ears as the noise threatened to split his head open. Glint scrambled to comply, yanking wires and flipping switches with frantic energy. The machine died with a final, pathetic whimper, leaving them in a silence so deep it was almost oppressive. "Well," Yara said eventually, breaking the stillness, "that was educational." "Educational," Markov echoed incredulously. "We nearly got blended into cosmic soup. But we learned something," Glint insisted, though he looked like he'd rather have learned it from a book. "It responds to real emotions, but it doesn't know how to handle them. It's curious." "Curious and homicidal," Markov corrected, rubbing the back of his neck where the tension had knotted his muscles into hard ropes. "But we can use that," Yara insisted, that gleam of mischief back in her eyes. "We just need to refine our approach, control the emotions better, focus them." Cragg nodded, his usual grunt having graduated into a full sentence. "Keep trying." Markov couldn't help but laugh, the sound raw and tired. "I must be mad because I'm actually agreeing with you." "All right," we regroup, rethink, and try again. They huddled together, their makeshift family of misfits, planning their next move in this cosmic chess game. The stakes were high, the risks greater than they'd ever faced. But there was a strange comfort in their camaraderie, a sense of belonging that transcended the walls of their prison. And so they prepared, ready to dance once more with the anomaly, hope and fear mingling in equal measure with the relentless thrum of their hearts. "Just another day in paradise," Markov muttered, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "Wouldn't have it any other way," Yara replied with a soft chuckle. The room, still vibrating with the echoes of their failed attempt, seemed to sigh in agreement. And though the future was uncertain and the path fraught with danger, they moved forward, driven by the indomitable spirit that defined them. For in the end, what else could they do but laugh in the face of the universe and dare it to do its worst? Markov leaned against the cold, unyielding wall of Zigrax's corridor, trying to ignore the guard's gaze. A mixture of boredom and disdain that was as stale as the recycled air they all breathed. The warden's latest edict had come down like a hammer on their heads, metaphorically smashing what little hope they had left. The new rules were strict as hell and twice as confusing. Turns out, authorities don't like it when inmates start playing with cosmic anomalies. "Looks like all Warden Cross finally got wind of our little seance," Markov remarked, nudging Yara as they made their way back to their corner of misery. "Yeah," Yara replied, unamused. "And now he's got his knickers in a twist about inmate safety and operational security. As if he cares about anything other than his damn reputation. Well, when your reputation's as fragile as a soap bubble in a sandstorm, I guess you cling to whatever straws you can," Markov replied with a dry laugh. Cragg walked silently beside them, his hulking presence like a monolith that threatened, or perhaps promised, something unpleasant if you crossed him. Glint was a few steps behind, fiddling absent-mindedly with his contraption, oblivious to the glaring threats from the guards. He was the kind of guy who'd trip over his own feet if he wasn't careful, and right now, his attention span was about as reliable as a sand timer in a vacuum. As they entered their makeshift hideout, Markov couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on them, and not the friendly kind. The kind that belonged to people who'd love to see you fail just so they could feel a little better about their own miserable existence. "All right, so the powers that be have decided to rain on our parade," Markov announced, settling onto a crate with the air of a man who knows he's about to hear a funeral dirge. "Warden Cross is definitely onto us." "Great," Yara said, rolling her eyes. "Because what we needed was more pressure. Think of it like a cosmic game of hide and seek," Markov said, forcing a grin. "With fewer rules and more psychotic warden types." Glint glanced up from his gadget, his eyes wide with the kind of energy that was usually reserved for people who just realized they left the oven on. "So what do we do now? Roll over and let them pat us on the belly?" "No," Yara said, a spark of defiance in her eyes. "We find another way, maybe even another place where we can do this without getting our heads on a pike." "And where would you suggest?" Markov asked, crossing his arms. "We're in a goddamn prison floating in space. It's not like there's a hidden room behind a bookcase." Yara's silence was almost louder than any snarky comeback she could have mustered, but then her gaze shifted towards a section of the wall that was more shadow than substance. "Maybe the prison's got more hidden than we know," she murmured. Markov followed her gaze, squinting into the dimness. "You think there's some secret passage like in those old Earth movies?" Yara shrugged. "Zigrax was built by the lowest bidder. Who knows what kind of corners they cut?" Crag made a noise that was somewhere between a grunt and a growl, as if he was about to add his 2 cents, his usual contribution to any plan that involved more thinking than punching. "Well, it's not like we have any better options," Markov decided. "Let's go hunting for ghosts in the walls." They started their search with cautious determination, creeping through the bowels of the prison like a pack of lost bloodhounds. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the air became, pressing in on them with the weight of 100 unspoken secrets. Eventually they found it, a section of the wall that looked as if it had been forgotten by everyone except time. Markov pressed against it, feeling an odd click under his palm. The wall groaned in protest, swinging open with a reluctant creak. Beyond, a narrow passage beckoned, cloaked in dust and shadows, smelling faintly of mildew and isolation. "Well, what do you know?" Glint breathed, peering over Markov's shoulder. "Secret passage. Just like in the Holovids. Let's hope it doesn't lead to a monster's den," Markov replied with a lopsided grin. "Or worse, another warden's office." They slipped inside, the door closing behind them with a shudder that felt final. The passage led downward, winding into the bowels of the station, the air growing colder and more stale with every step. It was like descending into some kind of ancient crypt. Eventually they emerged into a cavernous chamber, dimly lit by the flicker of failing overhead lights. And there, nestled among the dust and debris of a forgotten time, stood rows of bookshelves. Real, physical books, something they hadn't seen in years. "Is this some kind of ancient library?" Yara asked, all lacing her voice for once. "Either that or the world's worst-stocked gift shop," Markov quipped, running a finger along the spine of a book, leaving a trail in the dust. "Some of these titles, they are like myths and legends." Glint picked up a book, squinting at the faded lettering. "Cryptic stories of the universe. Sounds promising." Yara pulled out another, her expression thoughtful. "If these tales are as old as they look, there might be something in them, something to help us understand the anomaly." Markov nodded, the pieces of a half-formed plan beginning to align in his mind. "We're in deep waters, folks, but maybe these can be our lifeboats." They set to work, flipping through pages that crumbled at the touch, each story more bizarre and arcane than the last. It was like surfing the mind of a madman, where reality bent and twisted in ways that defied logic. "Hey, check this out," Glint said, waving a book excitedly. "This one talks about a star eater, something that feeds on emotions and stories just like our anomaly." "So the universe has a taste for bedtime stories," Markov muttered, though there was a hint of excitement beneath his sarcasm. Yara leaned closer, her eyes scanning the text. "But it also says something about using emotions as a kind of shield, directing them in a way that confuses or even pacifies it. So, we become emotional warriors." Markov laughed, the sound echoing off the walls like a madman's cackle. "I always knew my neuroses would come in handy. But if this is real," Yara said, her tone suddenly serious, "then we might have a chance, a real chance. Assuming we don't get caught first," Glint added, his ever-present anxiety making an appearance. Crag, who'd been silent all this time, stepped forward and pulled a book from a shelf, flipping it open. "Then better hurry," Markov nodded, a grin spreading across his face. All right, folks, let's get reading. We've got ourselves a space anomaly to outwit. The Iors passed in a blur of ancient text and whispered speculation, their minds straining to absorb the cryptic wisdom hidden in the pages. And as they read, they began to see patterns, hints of a strategy that might just give them the edge they so desperately needed. "What do you think, Markov?" Yara asked, breaking the silence with a voice that was hoarse from disuse. "I think we've got a fighting chance," he replied, his eyes gleaming with determination. "But it all hinges on whether we can pull this off without tipping off Warden Cross." "Speaking of the devil," Glint said, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper, "I think we've got company." The sound of footsteps echoed down the passage, heavy and deliberate, not the kind of sound that belonged to a friendly face. "Time to go," Markov hissed, snapping the book shut and shoving it under his arm. They scrambled back the way they'd come, their hearts pounding in time with their footsteps. The thrill of discovery was tinged with the bitter taste of impending capture. They reached the secret door just as the footsteps drew nearer, slipping through and closing it behind them with a soft click. As they emerged into the relative safety of the main corridor, Markov couldn't help but laugh, a breathless, exhilarated sound. "Remind me to thank the architect for that one," he said, leaning against the wall to catch his breath. "Thanking architects," Yara replied with a raised eyebrow. "Now I know you've gone mad." "Mad enough to have a plan," Markov countered, holding up the book like a trophy. "Let's get back to our corner and see if we can't whip up some cosmic mischief." With the threat of discovery still hanging over them like a guillotine, they slipped back to their hideout, hearts pounding with the thrill of their near escape. The air was thick with tension, a palpable reminder of the stakes they were playing for. As they huddled together, the flickering light casting jagged shadows around them, Markov felt a strange sense of resolve settling over him. They had a chance, slim as a hair's breadth, but a chance all the same. And in this place, where hope was a currency more precious than any other, that was enough. "All right," Markov said, opening the book with a flourish and a grin. "Let's find out if we can't teach a cosmic anomaly how to dance." And so they set to work, weaving stories and emotions into a plan that might just tip the balance in their favor. All the while, the specter of Warden Cross loomed large in their minds, a reminder that the clock was ticking and the noose was tightening. But in that moment, they were more than prisoners. They were a force to be reckoned with, ready to face whatever the universe and the Warden threw their way. Markov Jet found himself wondering, not for the first time, if the universe had a personal grudge against him. Ever since the anomaly decided to start merging realities, because apparently one was never enough, things had gone from bad to worse. Not that they started off particularly rosy in the orbital megaprison Zigrax, but at least they hadn't been quite so close to a cosmic blender. "So, let me get this straight," Markov said, rubbing the bridge of his nose as if that might somehow alleviate the headache pounding against his skull. "Not only do we have to deal with Warden Cross breathing down our necks, but now reality itself is coming apart at the seams." Yara Solace, sitting across from him with a book in her lap, nodded grimly. "Looks like it, and if we're not careful we're going to end up as cosmic soup." "Cosmic soup," Markov repeated, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "All the flavor, none of the fun." Glint, his hands still fiddling with his ever-present contraption, chimed in. "At least it'd be some variety. Getting tired of the same old existential dread." "Speaking of existential dread," Yara said, her eyes flicking to the door, "any updates on the Warden's latest attempt to play God?" "Security's tighter than a miser's purse," Markov replied. "He's more paranoid than usual, which is saying something." "Perfect," Yara said, sighing. "Just what we need. A cosmic anomaly and a power-hungry Warden. Double trouble." Cragg, who rarely graced the conversation with his voice, grunted in agreement. It was the sort of sound that could mean anything from "I agree" to "I think I saw a rat." As the three of them sat in their makeshift hideout, the tension was palpable. The air crackled with it, a constant reminder of the thin line they were walking between discovery and survival. And then, As if the universe decided things weren't exciting enough, the door to their hideout swung open with a squeal that would have made a banshee proud. "Guess what?" came a voice, one too familiar, too smug. It was Falco, another inmate with a reputation for being as trustworthy as a snake oil salesman with a gambling problem. "The warden knows about your little library excursion." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Markov felt a cold sweat break out on the back of his neck. "How'd he find out, Falco?" "Oh, you know," Falco said, his grin a tad too wide. "A little birdie told him. And by birdie I mean me." The silence that followed was the kind that suggested somebody might just end up as a smear on the wall. Markov's fists clenched involuntarily. "Why the hell would you do that?" Falco shrugged, the universal gesture of a man who's just saved his own skin at the expense of others. "Cut a deal with the devil, didn't I? My neck was on the line and Cross promised to make my life a little less miserable. You know how it is. You sold us out," Yara said flatly, her voice colder than space itself. "Don't take it personally," Falco replied, which was about as effective as telling a drowning man not to get wet. "Just business." Markov exchanged a glance with Yara and Glint. They were cornered, betrayed by one of their own, and the clock was ticking down to something unpleasant. It was like being in a particularly nasty game of chess, except the pieces were all made of unstable explosives. "All right, Falco," Markov said, forcing calm into his voice. "What exactly did you tell him?" "Enough," Falco said, his eyes darting between them like a cornered animal. "He knows about the books, the anomaly, everything, and he's bringing the hammer down." Crag moved then, his massive form looming over Falco like a mountain of silent menace. It was impressive, really, how much threat he could convey without uttering a word. Falco flinched, taking a step back. "Easy, big guy, I'm just the messenger." "Bad news travels fast," Markov muttered, his mind racing. They'd need a new plan, and fast. Something to counteract the inevitable crackdown from Cross. "We need to get to the anomaly before he does, if he figures out how to use it." Yeah, I get it," Falco interrupted. "End of the world, cosmic horror, blah blah. Look, I might have screwed you over, but I'm not keen on getting sucked into another dimension or whatever." "You really have a way with words," Yara said dryly. "All right, team," Markov said, standing up and shoving the book into his satchel. "We've got to move. Falco, you're coming with us, you owe us that much." "Do I have a choice?" Falco asked, though the answer was clear. "Not really," Markov replied. "Let's go. Whatever's coming, we need to be ready." And with that they set off, their footsteps echoing eerily in the deserted corridors of Zigrax. The prison was unusually quiet, as if the very walls were holding their breath, waiting for the storm to hit. "How far do you think Cross is willing to go?" Glint asked, his voice a nervous whisper. "As far as it takes," Markov replied. "He'll want to keep control of this place no matter the cost, and if he can harness the anomaly's power, well, that's just icing on the cake." "And if he can't?" Yara asked. "Then we're all screwed," Markov said with a grimace. "Because if that thing goes off, it's not just Zigrax at risk, it's everything." Their path took them deeper into the heart of the prison, where the air was thicker, the shadows longer. Zigrax wasn't just a prison, it was a relic, a monument to humanity's worst impulses. And now it was their only chance at stopping the anomaly. As they neared the control hub, Falco stopped suddenly, his eyes wide and fearful. "Shit, it's starting." They looked up to see the walls shimmering like heat haze on a summer's day. Only this wasn't warmth, it was reality coming apart at the seams, a tapestry of madness unfurling right before their eyes. "We're running out of time," Markov said, urgency sharpening his tone. "Come on." The control hub loomed ahead, a fortress of steel and circuitry, and somewhere inside was the key to controlling, or at least surviving, the anomaly. But as they approached, it was clear they weren't the only ones with that idea. A squad of guards, led by the ever-charming Warden Cross, stood at the entrance, their expressions a mix of determination and fear. Cross himself looked more like a man on the edge of a breakdown than ever, his eyes wild, his posture tense. "Ah, Markov," Cross called, his voice echoing in the corridor. I was wondering when you'd show your face. Here I am, Markov replied, spreading his arms wide. Long time no see, Warden. How's the world domination business? Cross's smile was all teeth. Busy, as you can imagine, but I appreciate you coming to see me off. See you off planning a trip? Markov asked, his voice light despite the tension crackling in the air. In a manner of speaking, Cross said, gesturing to the anomaly as it pulsed ominously. Once I have control of this, I'll be a free man. And you'll be, well, I suppose you'll be one with the cosmos. Sounds a bit cramped for my taste, Markov retorted, taking a step forward. But here's the thing, Cross, I don't think you can control it. I think it's going to eat you alive. Cross's smile faltered just for a second before he regained his composure. Confidence is admirable, Markov, but misplaced. This is just another challenge, another problem to solve. Problem? Yara cut in, her voice sharp. This isn't a math equation, Cross, it's a cosmic anomaly. You don't just solve it, you survive it. That's where you're wrong, Cross said, his eyes gleaming with a zealot's fervor. I am going to solve it, and you're going to help me. Fat chance, Glint muttered, sticking close to Markov. I'm afraid you don't have a choice, Cross replied, nodding to his guards. Escort them inside. We have work to do. There was a moment's hesitation, a silent standoff as the guards weighed their orders against the chaos unfolding around them. But in the end, Cross's authority won out. They moved forward, herding Markov and his team towards the hub. Any bright ideas? Glint whispered, his eyes flicking nervously to the anomaly which was now glowing with a sickly light. Working on it, Markov replied, though his mind was racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and out of time. But they still had one advantage. They knew the stories. They knew the secrets of the anomaly and how it could be manipulated. As they were ushered into the control hub, Markov caught Yara's eye. She nodded slightly, understanding passing between them without a word. They had one chance to turn this around, and it was going to take every ounce of cunning they had. Cross was already at the controls, his hands moving with the precision of a man who thinks he's in control. Let's get started, he said, his voice calm, almost casual. Markov took a deep breath, stepping forward. All right, Cross. Let's see what you're made of. The room was filled with tension, the air thick with the anticipation of 1,000 potential disasters. But there was also a spark of hope, a glimmer of possibility that maybe, just maybe, they could pull this off. So, how do you want to do this? Markov asked, his tone conversational despite the chaos around them. Magic words, secret handshake. Human sacrifice. Very funny, Markov, Cross replied, his eyes never leaving the controls. But this is science, not superstition. Science, Markov repeated, nodding as if he actually believed it. Sure, let's go with that. As Cross continued his preparations, Markov exchanged a look with Yara and Glint. It was time to put their plan into action. Time to see if they could outwit a cosmic anomaly and a mad warden all in one go. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble. But in Zigrak's, long shots were sometimes all you had, and sometimes, just sometimes, they paid off. With a grim smile, Markov turned his attention back to Cross. All right, Warden, let's dance. The fate of Zigrak's and maybe the universe hung in the balance. But Markov wasn't about to let that stop him. Not now. Not ever. The stale air of Zigrak's control room was thick with tension, like a cheap suspense novel someone forgot to finish reading. Markov took a deep breath, or at least as deep as one could in a place where air was recycled more times than the excuses of a habitual liar. He let his gaze settle on his ragtag team, Crag, silent as ever but reliable like a trusty battering ram, Yara, who had a mind sharper than a hacksaw blade, and Glint, perpetually fiddling with his contraption as if it were the key to the universe. Their eyes met, a silent communication passing between them. They'd been dealt a bad hand, but they were still in the game. Yara, ever the one for uncomfortable truths, broke the silence. We're not dead yet, so let's keep it that way. Remember those ancient tales, the ones about anomalies? Markov raised an eyebrow. You mean the bedtime stories for people who like nightmares? Yeah, those, Yara replied, with the kind of smile one wears when serving someone a plate of bad news with a side of deal with it. There's a pattern in them, a narrative structure that seems to resonate with the anomalies. Glint snorted, his hands never pausing in their ceaseless dance over wires and circuits. So, we tell the anomaly a bedtime story and hope it doesn't get pissed off and eat us. Sounds foolproof. I'm serious, Yara insisted, her tone holding a note of urgency that could cut through the thickest of skepticism. The anomalies respond to stories. It's like they're waiting for a narrative to latch onto, something to anchor them. It might be our way to control it or at least redirect it. Markov rubbed his temples, a grimace forming on his face. So, what you're saying is we need to become cosmic storytellers and hope the universe doesn't have a terrible taste in literature. Essentially, Yara said, crossing her arms. But it's more than that. We need a story that involves all of us, something that pulls in our experiences, our uniqueness. Great, Markov sighed. So not only do we have to fight off Cross and his goons, we have to do it while giving the performance of our lives. Crag grunted, his version of a pep talk. Brief, but effective. Falco, who had been hovering near the doorway like a bad smell you couldn't quite place, spoke up. I don't suppose there's a happy ending in any of those stories. Markov shot him a look. Define happy. Not dead. Well then, there's always hope, Markov replied, with the kind of optimism you use when you're about to charge a dragon armed with nothing but a toothpick. As Cross continued to mess with controls as if he actually knew what he was doing, Markov gestured for the others to huddle. It was time to strategize, or more accurately, to pull a plan out of thin air and hope it didn't dissolve like everything else seemed to be doing lately. Yara spoke first. The structure of the stories, it's like a ritual. They start with a call to action, a challenge, a quest. We need something that fits. Something that can incorporate the anomaly and us. How about once upon a time, a bunch of idiots got stuck in a prison floating in the void, then decided to poke at the universe until it poked back, Glint suggested, not missing a beat. Works for me, Markov said dryly. But maybe we leave out the idiot's bit when telling it. Crag nodded in agreement, or maybe he was just tired of standing still. Hard to tell with him sometimes. Yara's eyes lit up in a way that suggested she just pieced together a particularly troublesome puzzle. The stories always have a hero's journey, right? We fit the roles. Markov, you're the reluctant leader. Reluctant, try drafted. Markov shot back. Glint, you're the engineer who can unlock anything, including the universe's worst-kept secrets. Yara continued, ignoring the interruption. Nice to finally be appreciated, Glint smirked. Crag, you're the muscle, the steadfast guardian. Crag acknowledged this with a grunt that somehow managed to convey a mix of pride and the hope that no one expected a speech. And me, Yara finished. I'm the knowledge, the navigator. Markov gave a mock bow. Looks like we've got the whole gang then. Now all we need is an audience with a short attention span. Cross, oblivious to the whispered plotting, was still preoccupied with trying to harness what was essentially a cosmic cataclysm with the managerial skills of an overworked bureaucrat. Markov had seen more competent leadership from a sock puppet. Our story, Yara whispered. We need to start it. We have to make the anomaly listen before Cross does something irreversible. Markov nodded, stepping forward to address the room at large. Once upon a time, there was a prison in the stars, filled with the universe's misfits and outcasts. Falco snickered. Sounds familiar. Shut up and listen, Yara snapped, her patience thinner than a sheet of paper in a hurricane. We need you if this is going to work. As Markov continued, he fleshed out the story, detailing their journey through zigzags, the moments of fear, the fleeting triumphs, and the ever-present specter of the anomaly. Each character played their part, weaving their experiences into the narrative, creating a tapestry of desperation and hope. Cross, noticing the shift in the room, paused his frenzied attempts at control and turned to face them. "What do you think you're doing?" he demanded, his voice tinged with suspicion and more than a hint of desperation. "Just telling a story, Cross," Markov replied, trying to keep his tone casual. Thought we could all use a distraction. From the end of reality, Cross asked, his eyes narrowing. Exactly, Markov said. And you know what? It's working. The anomaly, which had previously been a chaotic mass of shifting reality, seemed to pulse in response to the story, the edges of its form stabilizing, almost as if it were listening. Yara took over, her voice carrying the cadence of a practiced storyteller. Each one of us has a role, a purpose. Even the villain, the one who pushes the hero to greater heights. That would be you, Cross. The warden's expression twisted, a mix of anger and confusion. I am not a villain, he protested weakly. Every good story needs one, Glint said, his grin sharp. And who better than the man trying to control the uncontrollable? Cross hesitated, glancing between them and the anomaly. The guards shifted uncomfortably, the lines of authority blurring as the narrative took hold. And so, Yara continued, her voice strong, the warden, blinded by ambition, unwittingly aided the heroes by giving them the very challenge they needed to overcome. Cross opened his mouth to argue, but the anomaly pulsed again, brighter this time, as if encouraging their tale. Markov stepped back in, his words flowing with a confidence born of desperation. And together, they faced the anomaly, not as enemies but as storytellers, crafting a new reality where they all survived. The room held its breath, as if the entire universe was waiting for the punchline. Cross, seemingly caught between his own ambitions and the surreal power of the narrative, faltered. Maybe you're right, Cross said, his voice softer, the fight leaving him. Maybe there is another way. Markov seized the moment. There is, we rewrite the story together. The anomaly responding to the collective narrative began to stabilize. The chaos at its core eased, the fracturing reality knitting itself back together. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it was enough to stop the unraveling. Yara, sensing the shift, pressed on. And so, the heroes and their unlikely ally forged a new path, one where they could all find freedom, not from the prison, but from the roles they'd been forced to play. The guards, no longer sure who to follow or what to believe, stood down, their weapons lowered. Markov let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Looks like the universe might have a taste for drama after all. Crag grunted his agreement, while Glint gave a thumbs up, his focus still partly on his contraption. Falco, standing in the back, shook his head in disbelief. I can't believe that worked. Never underestimate the power of a good story, Markov replied with a weary smile. And never underestimate the power of desperation, Yara added, her own relief clear. As the anomaly settled into a more stable form, the tension in the room slowly dissipated. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a start. And sometimes, in a place like Zigrax, a start was all you needed. Zigrax, that floating palace of broken dreams and unflattering jumpsuits, wasn't the place you'd expect to host a cosmic showdown. Yet here we were, crafting reality with nothing but wit and desperation as our tools. If irony had a smell, it would be wafting through these cold, unyielding corridors. Markov, our appointed commander-in-chief of the doomed, scratched at the stubble on his chin, a luxury kept by the few who found facial hair more trustworthy than a razor in this place. All right, so we're continuing with this cosmic bedtime story approach, right? His voice oozed with the confidence of a man who'd seen plans crumble into chaos more often than not. Yara nodded, the gleam in her eye suggesting she either had a plan or had finally cracked under the pressure. The anomaly's listening. We need to weave our tale carefully. It's all about structure. Build the tension, deliver the climax, and pray it prefers plot twists over body counts. Glint, tinkering with that contraption of his, an assortment of wires and wishful thinking, chimed in. So, we're basically the cast of some poorly scripted drama series, hoping the universe tunes in for the season finale. Pretty much, Markov replied, a sardonic twist to his lips. And if we're lucky, maybe we'll get cancelled before the final death scene. Crag, the human equivalent of an immovable object, leaned against the wall. His one-word pep talks were legendary, mostly because they were the only kind he gave. Survive. Falco, who had been developing a profound relationship with the doorway, finally decided to contribute. I'd like to remind our audience that survival is preferable to any happy ending. Spoken like a true pessimist, Yara quipped. Remind me again why you're here. Comic relief, Falco deadpanned. Cross, meanwhile, was having a crisis of faith, or maybe just a regular crisis. The Anomaly's interplay with their story had scrambled his command into a state of hesitant obedience. The guards, previously a wall of unyielding muscle, now stood fidgeting, unsure if they were extras in this unfolding drama or just next on the universe's list of casualties. "So what's next in this story, Chief?" Glint asked, giving a nod to Markov, who seemed to have been thrust into the role of director instead of just unwilling hero. Markov rubbed his temples, as if hoping to massage out some semblance of a coherent plan. "Well, according to the classics, now's the time for the big revelation, right?" Yara snapped her fingers. "Exactly. We need to reveal the hidden truth, the thing that changes everything. Like how Cross has been using the Anomaly for some top-secret pet project," Falco suggested with a look that was only half kidding. Cross, regaining some of his composure, glared back. "I assure you, I'm just as baffled as the rest of you. I didn't sign up for a reality-bending interpretation of my worst day at work." "Then maybe we focus on the Anomaly itself," Yara continued, ignoring the warden's protestations. "It's not just a threat, it's a mirror, reflecting the chaos of those who interact with it." Glint raised an eyebrow. "So, what? We do a little introspection, tell it we're sorry for being such a mess, and hope it gives us a cosmic hug," Markov snorted. "Or maybe it just needs a good laugh. Someone tell it the one about the inmates and the cosmic horror." "Oh, wait." Crag grunted in what might have been a laugh or a cough. Hard to tell with him. As they continued weaving their tale, the Anomaly pulsed, a slow, rhythmic dance that mirrored their narrative beats. The light in the room flickered, shadows playing tag on the walls. If it weren't so terrifying, it might have been beautiful. "Okay, time for the climax," Yara announced. "We bring it all together. The conflict, the resolution." Markov took a deep breath, stepping forward like a man approaching the gallows with grace. "Once upon a time," he began, his voice carrying over the hum of failing electronics and frayed nerves, "there was a group of people who didn't belong. Not in this universe, not in any. But together, they found a way to create their own place. The others joined in, their voices weaving a tapestry of words that danced around the Anomaly, binding it with the threads of their shared story." Yara, ever the navigator, guided them with her words. In their quest, they discovered that the universe wasn't just a cruel, indifferent void. It was a canvas, waiting for them to paint their own destinies. Cross, now less the villain and more the unwilling player, found his place in the narrative. And the warden, once blinded by ambition, saw the truth in their words and chose to join them to help craft a new reality. The Anomaly pulsed brighter, its chaotic form stabilizing, as if the story were a bomb soothing its fractious edges. "And so," Glint added, his smirk replaced by something almost sincere, "the engineer, the warrior, the leader, and the navigator became more than their roles. They became the authors of a new beginning." Crag's contribution was simple but profound. Together, the Anomaly flared once more, its light almost blinding, the reality around them warped, the air shimmering with the potential of 1,000 unwritten tales. And then, with a final burst of energy, it settled, a gentle pulse, a heartbeat echoing in the silence. The room, previously a chaotic mess of failed expectations and cosmic dread, was now calm. The guards, no longer tense, relaxed their stances. Even Cross seemed lighter, his paranoia tempered by the realization that maybe, just maybe, there was more to life than control. Markov looked around, a wry smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Well, that was unexpected." Yara leaned against a console, her relief palpable. "I think we did it." Glint nodded, still fiddling with his contraption out of habit more than necessity. "So, do we get a Nobel Prize for narrative therapy or something?" Falco, ever the realist, shrugged. I'd settle for a cheeseburger and a one-way ticket out of here. Crag merely grunted, content to let his silence speak volumes. Cross, now standing beside them in a show of reluctant camaraderie, cleared his throat. I suppose an apology is in order. For what it's worth, I never intended for things to go this far. Apology accepted, Markov said, extending a hand. Just remember, sometimes the best way to control something is to let it be. The warden shook his hand, a truce of sorts, sealed not by necessity but by understanding. As the anomaly continued its gentle rhythm, the group stood in a rare moment of peace, the specters of their past roles fading into the periphery. They had survived, not through force or cunning, but through the simple power of a shared story. And for a place like Zigrax, that was nothing short of a miracle. "What now?" Glint asked, breaking the silence with the kind of practicality that had kept them alive this long. Yara smiled, a rare, genuine smile that spoke of new beginnings. "Now we write a new story, one where we choose the ending." Markov nodded, his gaze fixed on the anomaly, now a constant reminder of what they'd achieved. "Yeah. Because if there's one thing we've learned, it's that sometimes all you need is the right story." As they began to disperse, the guards returning to their posts, the tension easing into routine, Falco's voice rang out, a final note of wry humor to punctuate their tale. "So, when do we tell them about the sequel?" Markov chuckled, shaking his head. "Let's just stick with the original for now." And with that, they left the control room, leaving the anomaly to pulse gently in its newfound stability, a testament not to chaos or destruction, but to the unexpected power of human creativity and unity. In Zigrax, of all places, they'd found a way to craft a new reality. And in doing so, they'd proven that sometimes, the most profound weapon against the void was simply a story well told. As they walked away, the universe around them seemed to exhale, the pressure of 1,000 untold possibilities settling into something manageable, something hopeful. And for the misfits of Zigrax, that was a story worth telling. Zigrax, once the cosmic junk drawer of humanity's castoffs, now hummed with the uneasy calm of a hangover morning. The anomaly, now a tame little ripple in the fabric of reality, pulsed like a satisfied cat, reminding everyone it could still cough up a hairball of existential dread if provoked. Markov leaned against a rail, gaze drifting over the changes unraveling in the aftermath. With the anomaly contained, the prison was undergoing a transformation akin to a midlife crisis. Gone were the tense guard patrols, replaced by a quiet camaraderie among inmates and wardens alike. The air felt different, as if someone had finally opened a window in this stale, recycled atmosphere. "Well, look at that," Markov muttered to no one in particular. All it took was a little narrative therapy to turn this place into a summer camp for the criminally creative. Yara appeared at his side, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. Who knew all it took to save the universe was a compelling third act? "Yeah," Markov replied, chuckling. "Someone should have told the universe we were doing improv. It might have been gentler with us." Across the room, Glint was still fiddling with his beloved contraption. It buzzed and blinked like a prop from a low-budget sci-fi flick, but Glint treated it like a firstborn. "So, where do we go from here, boss? Now that we're not on a one-way trip to cosmic oblivion," Markov shrugged. "I suppose we focus on fixing this place up. Maybe start with a fresh coat of paint, something other than prison gray." Yara nodded. "And maybe a buffet. If we're going to play happy family with the guards, we might as well eat like one." Falco wandered over, still radiating the energy of a man who'd seen too much and slept too little. "I'm just glad we're not the bug on the windshield of some interdimensional road trip. What's next?" "Group therapy sessions. Something like that," Markov replied. "We've got plenty of time and space. Might as well use it to figure out what the hell to do with ourselves." Crag grunted his agreement. For someone who communicated in monosyllables, he had a knack for voicing the collective mood. The man was a walking existential crisis wrapped in muscles, but he was their existential crisis. As they talked, something remarkable began to happen. The prisoners, the supposed dregs of humanity, started to mingle with the guards, sharing stories, jokes, and, most importantly, hope. It was as if the anomaly had not just merged realities, but had also blurred the lines between captive and captor. Markov watched the mingling with a wry smile. See, who needs therapy when you've got a universal near-death experience to bond over? Cheaper too, Yara added, her gaze softening as she watched a group of inmates and guards attempt to play a makeshift game of soccer with an old can. This might just work. Cross, who had taken up a spot near them, nodded. His paranoia had been knocked down a peg or two, replaced by an understanding that sometimes letting go was the only way to maintain control. Never thought I'd see the day, he confessed, voice tinged with a hint of awe. But damn if it isn't something. Don't get too sentimental, Warden, Markov teased. You might just start enjoying yourself. Cross chuckled, the sound awkward but genuine. Well, they say life begins at the end of your comfort zone, and I've been way past mine for a while now. Glint finished with his contraption, standing up with a flourish. Well, what do you know? It works better as a paperweight. He tossed it onto a nearby table where it settled into a dutiful silence, its purpose fulfilled. Falco, who had been watching this newfound social experiment unfold, piped up. You know, I always thought the only thing that could unite prisoners and guards was a good riot. Guess it turns out a cosmic anomaly does the trick too. Markov clapped him on the back. You're always so optimistic, Falco. A real ray of sunshine in this otherwise bleak existence. Hey, someone's gotta keep the sarcasm quota up, Falco replied with a grin. As the day stretched into a surreal sort of normalcy, the group found themselves back in the control room. The air tasted of dust and potential, a reminder of what they'd been through and what lay ahead. So, what's next for the great storytellers of Zigrax? Yara asked, her tone both mocking and sincere. Markov pondered, a thoughtful frown creasing his brow. You ever think about what got us here? Not just the anomaly, but all of us. Glint nodded. Yeah, it's like one of those cheesy flashbacks in an old movie. All the choices, the screw-ups, the moments we thought would be our last. They brought us here. Funny how life works, Yara mused. You start off thinking your store is a tragedy, but maybe it's just a dark comedy with a happy ending. Crag, ever the minimalist, offered his 2 cents. Life, profound as always, Crag, Markov said, running a hand through his hair. But yeah, maybe that's it. We all got a second chance here. And maybe we can write a story that doesn't end with us all floating in the void. Falco interrupted, a twinkle of mischief in his eyes. Or we could just sell the rights to our story and retire on the royalties. Don't tempt me, Markov laughed. But hey, if this goes well, we've got plenty of material for a sequel. Cross, surprisingly at ease in this new world order, joined them. I think we've all earned a bit of peace, and a chance to figure out who we want to be beyond prisoners and wardens. Markov extended a hand to Cross, sealing their strange alliance with a handshake. Agreed. And maybe, just maybe, we can turn this floating palace of broken dreams into something worth calling home. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. Zigrax, the place where stories went to die, had become a birthplace for new tales, new beginnings. In a universe that thrived on chaos, they'd carved out a sliver of hope, all with a story and a shared belief that they could be more than the sum of their parts. Who knows, Yara said, a soft smile playing on her lips. Maybe one day they'll tell our story, about how a ragtag group of misfits changed the universe. Markov chuckled, the sound rich and full of life. If they do, I just hope they get my good side. As they turned to leave the control room, a sense of purpose, a rare commodity in these parts, settled over them. They had survived, not just against the cosmic anomaly, but against the stories they'd told themselves for so long. Stories of failure, of futility, of inevitable doom. Now, as they walked back into the corridors of Zigrax, they carried with them a different narrative. One of survival, of unity, and of the human spirit's relentless desire to craft stories worth living. Hey, Markov, Falco called out, falling into step beside him. Yeah, think we'll ever get used to this? Falco waved a hand at the guards and inmates laughing together, the Anomaly's gentle pulse a background rhythm to their newfound peace. Markov thought for a moment, then shook his head. Probably not, but maybe that's the point. To keep writing the story as we go. And as they walked into the future, a future unwritten but full of potential, the universe seemed to pause, just for a moment, as if acknowledging their small but significant victory. A victory not just over an anomaly but over the limitations of their own stories. In that moment, Zigrax wasn't just a prison, it was a new beginning. And for Markov and his unlikely band of storytellers, that was a story worth telling. As they settled into their new roles, the reality of their situation began to sink in. They weren't just surviving anymore, they were living, and perhaps that was the greatest story of all. To new beginnings, Yara said, raising an invisible glass. To new stories, Markov added. And with that they set off, ready to write the next chapter of their lives, one wry, sarcastic, and hopeful word at a time.